put it together. Apologetics 1, lecture, what is it? 12. Capital punishment, the death penalty. Are you for it or against it? So right now, in general, without reading all this, just where you stand on it, are you basically for it or against it? So we have, including myself, 5 here. Wow. So what would you say? Let's say, who's against the death penalty, if that was a choice? For it or against it? Who would say I'm against it? No hands. Who's for it? You can clarify what for it means.
Yeah,
For it in principle.
Yeah.
Brother Ron, you don't know what the topic is.
I know what the topic is, and I really don't like either way.
Either way, okay. And online students, where are you at? Middle? Not sure, don't want to be caught in saying for or against? Okay, because there's problems on both sides. There are. So, if you're for it, real quickly here, who should be sentenced to death? Who would you say? Give me a scenario, or describe someone who should be sentenced to death.
Somebody who planned ahead and killed somebody in a horrible way.
A horrible way. Not just kill them, but it's got to be a horrible way.
Well,
Okay, I understand that because that's usually what happens when it's a horrible, heinous thing. Let's say decapitated, burnt their body, whatever. And whatever else you want to say, they got to die.
Killing in general.
Killing in general. How about anything other than murder?
no.
How about being a traitor? Selling their secrets to the commies? Because there's 2 reasons you can that I know of main reasons you can be given the death penalty. It's for some murder-related crime or espionage and all that. Traitor.
Treason, yeah.
Treason.
Depends how serious.
Treason's only during the time of war.
Yeah, I don't know all the details on it, but let's go on now. Since the institution of the death penalty, whenever that was, there has been almost 1,100 U.S. executions since 1976. That's an old number, but not as many as you might think. 1,100? That's a lot, but so it's not like we do it willy-nilly every day. We're doing it. Methods of capital punishment. Well, you can be electrocuted. Which would you choose? Electrocution, gas chamber, lethal injection, or hanging in the firing squad? So which of those 5 would you choose for yourself if you were going to get the death penalty?
Lethal injection.
I go for the firing squad.
What, you think you'll run away?
No.
You missed me?
No,
Okay.
I'm going to hope that their aim is good. Every single one of these others I've heard of horror stories of them messing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want lethal injection too.
You just go to sleep.
All right, give me a drug. First, you put me to sleep. Yeah, you got it down, you put it to sleep, and you just wake up in hell or in heaven, I suppose.
But I've heard of them messing that one up.
Oh, they can, but they can. I think they could mess up the firing squad a lot easier. Wow, come on, hit me with ow. Oh yeah, now I'm dead. We got the ow beforehand. You're a crazy woman. Yeah, I want to be shot to death.
Hopefully they're using their good
Use a 50 caliber, please, and have the guy just go right on here. Pull the trigger, come on.
Good beta.
All right, let's go on. My childhood here. Capital punishment is still commonly practiced in Islamic nations. Oh yeah, top his head off.
Yep.
They tend to follow the Old Testament mandates for its use. In America, only murder and treason are punishable by death, as far as I know. But I can find out. Maybe there's others, but that's what I can find out, so that's what you got to know. In a recent op-ed in the Chicago Tribune, following Illinois' abolition of the death penalty, this author and attorney Scott Turow outlined 3 major conservative reasons for opposing capital punishment. And he makes some sense here. It is a failed government program, we'll talk about that in a second. It's a waste of money, and it doesn't fit with the idea of limited government. So in each of these, it's got a point, in my view. In highlighting the failures of the system, Turow said, for conservatives who believe government is too large, too inefficient, and too unwieldy to deliver their health care, or even mail for that matter, it should come as no surprise that government efforts to justly select those worthy of death has been a moral disaster. Oh, that might be true. Not so good at other things. He said, if the death penalty clearly served a practical purpose like saving lives, these increased costs might be worth it. Because it costs a lot to do all this. But in Illinois, we have experienced a steady decline in our murder rates since Governor Ryan first declared the moratorium on executions. So once they stopped doing the death penalty, have seen a decline in the murder rate. Now, there's other variables in this, I'm
Then they
sure.
might have got guns legalized.
Yeah, I
maybe, or
who knows
something.
what the other factors were, but that's interesting. And yeah, do you want more power to the government?
No.
So this is just giving them more power, and maybe they'll say death penalty for anyone who hate crime,
Yeah.
hate speech, or you're one of those fundamentalist Christians, death penalty for them.
Exactly.
Maybe we wouldn't be for the death penalty.
Well, I'm too cheap, it's incredibly expensive.
Yes, we'll look at the cost in just a moment here. Washington State, this is from the Walla Walla Union Bulletin. Washington State currently has 8 men on death row, and has not had an execution since 2001. In almost 30 years, there's been only one non-consensual execution. I guess that's where the guy said, no, I don't want to be killed. 4 defendants have been executed since the death penalty was reinstated in 1981. The Washington State Bar Association report noted that of the 270 convictions for aggravated murder since 1981, the death penalty was sought 79 times, and then they got 30 death sentences. But not too many were killed, though. The majority of those cases were overturned on appeal, and most of those reversals resulted in life without parole sentences. The Bar Association estimates that a death penalty case costs about $750,000 more than other murder cases. That's not including the $100,000 associated with preparing for an execution.
Wow.
This isn't just throw them in a chair and fry them. There's all these things you go through and hiring people. I don't know all the parts
It's
to it.
almost $1 million.
Yeah, almost $1 million for the whole process, I guess, from when they're found, when they're given the sentence of, maybe it's from the beginning of the court cases.
It's from the beginning,
Beginning of
because
the court
it's like
cases
if
to
they're
the-
going for the death penalty, then there's like all these extra that has to be go into the whole process.
Investigations.
Extra appeals, extra money that they can have for the defense.
And wouldn't you say better safe than sorry
Yeah.
on this? Because, yeah, there are, we'll talk about this here, but there are some who have been on death row, but also they find out over the years
With
through DNA or whatever that they, I guess, were not guilty. At least what they were using wasn't enough to find them guilty. Interesting. Here's some excerpts from an article on capital punishment. All I could find out is his initials were JPH. That's all I had on my file, so I apologize. I don't know who it was. But you might be able to find the reference. Does the Bible support capital punishment? Few would answer this one in the negative, and even fewer can cite any scripture that works against it. But there are some that we'll come up with here now. It is patently obvious that capital punishment, hereafter called CP, was practiced in ancient Israel and was not repudiated in the New Testament at all, I state. One must carefully distinguish between saying that the Bible mandates capital punishment and saying that it merely permits it. So I agree. It seems to permit it, but it's not mandating it. Though for Israel it was a mandate. Or was it?
I thought it was before Israel. I thought it was in Noah's time.
Okay. Well, with the law, with Moses, they had certain things that were, well, we'll see these coming up.
Right.
Examples of capital punishment appear overwhelmingly in the Old Testament law and is prescribed for such things as adultery and witchcraft. So should we be enforcing it likewise today? So let's look up for a second. So how about for adultery?
You wouldn't have enough caskets.
Yeah. So maybe you'd have to say you've got 5 years and then this becomes a law. So you committing adultery now, just know, kind of like building up for Obamacare being initiated. So just build up for it.
All the judges would be killed by those other people. Not me, but I mean, that would just, I don't think you could do it.
Okay, it'd be difficult, but it matters what your conviction is on it. All right, witchcraft? Hang high. So no, he says, not on that basis. Deuteronomy is laid out in the form, and this is deep here, but is laid out in the form of an ancient treaty between a king and his vassals. It is in essence a contract between God and Israel. They signed on and agreed to enforce the penalties. What's the equivalent now to that? Well, we now have a covenant or a contract between Christ and the individual believer. The sins are paid for by Christ's blood, and He takes on the punishment for the transgression of those who break God's law and accept His payment. So should there be a death penalty, looking at this new contract? Well, the old covenant and our enmity with it is now abolished. The non-believer, the witch, etc., aren't covered by this, he says, but nor does our new contract contain specific specifications of enforcement. And that's true, because we're supposed to love each other, love our enemy, turn the other cheek, that sort of thing. It's on an individual basis, and the governmental institution involved with this? That's the big question. He says it's now in God's domain with regard to each individual on the basis of the new covenant terms. Let me finish this paragraph and then we'll talk. On the other hand, when a superior writes a contract, even if you are not a party to it, the contract will still give you an idea of what values the superior holds. So we know how God feels about murder, adultery. Yeah, he's kill them for it. We, as the children of God, no longer enforce the penalties like the children of God did with Israel. But we still know what actions displease God. And the New Testament does say that God has given authority to human governments. So it is now up to those bodies to decide, I don't know if you agree with that, but to decide whether capital punishment is necessary or not. It seems, I think what he's saying is that the Bible seems to give liberty to the government to decide this now. But what happens if they say, yeah, anyone who is anti-Islamic or is a homophobic person, off with their heads? Would God be for that?
No.
Of course not, because that would be us. So any comments?
Well, our country was founded on the Bible, and the judge system and the laws originally were founded on the Bible, and that's how they got the death penalty, I think, for murder. And I've read some stuff about that, but I mean, every sin is unto death. I mean, every sin sends us all to hell. So
Wages
it's
of sin
all
is death, right?
So I mean, everything. If you got to be careful where you go with stuff, because.
Well, how about in society? As you just look at our society in America, are you glad that there's laws?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and God wants there to be laws. So then there's deterrence to laws, or deterrence to crimes. So deterrence, some of these crimes is not a lot of deterrence. You got to spend a month in jail and they feed you and everything, and you come out, got some weight gained on you again, you're not so skinny, you go back on drugs again. But then there's the ultimate deterrent, which I would think would be, the death penalty. And maybe there are some things, some sins, some crimes out there that are so bad that they need that very intense deterrent. But there's some points here that they make on it that does that really help? How they go about it. So let me go on. He helps with some of your questions or some of your yeah buts right here. Why did these laws demand the death penalty? Obeying such laws in ancient Israel was a matter of survival, of ensuring that what there was of civilization did not slip over that fine line from order into chaos. So capital punishment was a necessary element to social order and survival. And they have a little different type. They had a little different type of civilization than we have. Of course, they wanted the blessings of God for number one. Plus, they were surrounded by enemies. And a primary pro-capital punishment argument is that capital punishment serves as a deterrent to crime. All right, but look what anti-capital punishment responses claim that there is no evidence of a deterrent effect. So I didn't do the research on that, but there it is. The lack of deterrent effect may be, and this is interesting, may be due to the fact that we don't see the death penalty as real in our minds. Executions are far removed from all but a few witnesses, and only one person pulls a switch or administers a drug. In contrast, capital punishment in Old Testament law was enforced by the community, picking up stones oftentimes and taking part of the condemnation of the guilt. They are guilty. They are guilty. You throw the stones. At least it was public and people saw it. A public decapitation or a stoning. One might suggest that the deterrent effect would be greater were capital punishment more in our face and personal as it was for the Israelites. I totally agree. But do we really want public, whatever you want, hangings, decapitations, lethal injections?
No, particularly.
In Times Square, 12:30 this afternoon.
What would happen?
Everyone gather around. I think just put it on TV. That'd be the way to solve it. What's that?
The French Revolution was a horrible example of what can go wrong with that.
Yeah. Turned into an entertainment.
I don't know anything about that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
They were, public executions? There's a problem with that?
Yeah, by the people who took over, the kind of radicals, and they were just executing everybody that looked like a royalty or was related.
Well, yeah, obviously it can get out of hand.
Yeah.
But my view is, and God's view, I would say in the Old Testament, I'm going to try and tell you what His view is, in my understanding, is do it publicly and for these crimes, and do it the same way every time. And it's shocking, and like when, remember, Azad, Akid, whatever his name is, the guy that had the Babylonian garment,
Yeah,
gold.
the gold.
Yeah.
So-
Achan. And so what did they do? They killed him, but also his family.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, hey, whoa, wait. Hey, this lets you know, you do something like this, Israel, there was only one person that messed it up for the whole nation, your whole family and generations are going. There's other reasons maybe, but, so God makes a big point, and going on with this in a moment, this is my belief, I don't know if it would work in today's society, but let's say you take, here we go, homosexuality, sodomy, the actual sodomy, caught in the act, no doubt about it, by more than one witness, and especially if you say, yes, I was doing that, is punishable by death. Let's say we follow the Old Testament mandate on that. And you do it public. Of course, you let people know way ahead of time, like 2, 4, 6, 10 years ahead of time. This is going to be the way it is. So change your behavior. But anyways, once it's enacted, you do it every time. And they ain't going to be doing it out in public anymore. And they're going to be very careful. And I think it'll be a huge deterrent. Some would say no, that this is kind of like abortion. They'll just go to back alley, witch doctor, use a coat hanger and all that, whatever they call it. So anyone think that if we did it consistently and publicly, it would be a significant deterrent to whatever that crime was?
Yep. That crime was?
Well, whatever you're doing it on, like this is wrong, like murder,
Right.
adultery, homosexuality. Well, I think the generation growing up seeing all that and going, Mommy, why did that happen to him? Adultery, son. What's adultery? I'll explain it to you. And in his mind he goes, he ain't ever going to do that.
Yeah.
Might have a generational level change. So let's go on here because I got way off. So now, what now threatens society? In our present state, many of the Old Testament crimes are not threats to society in a broader sense. I don't know if you'll agree with this. Things like adultery weaken a family unit, but not society as a whole.
I agree with that.
No.
If enough people become adulterous, though, that may change. I think enough have.
Yeah.
If a behavior like adultery became a threat to such an extent, one might argue that capital punishment should be instituted for it at some point. But because our society is individualistic rather than collectivist, it is unlikely that that will ever happen. So comparing it with Israel and how we are in America, it's a different style of government. A thoughtful determination would therefore have to be made in terms of what behaviors might threaten society. So that's probably the bigger question. What behavior or crime threatens us so much that we need to have like the ultimate deterrent to it? So what's the worst crime? I would say abusing children. And I mean really abusing them, not just, they spanked them when they were in. This is the horrible things, where they actually, rape and kill them, that type. That should be, man, they've got hell coming probably, so God's going to take care of it all, but that person should die.
But also murder, you say, too, right?
Well, yeah, but I'm just looking at about the worst thing I can imagine
Oh.
of a sin, to me, in my heart, is really, taking my child and doing that. That's the worst. That's the one I go, oh Lord, do I know my weak spot? There it is. If that happens to me, I don't know what I'll turn out to be. Meaning if that happened to my family. Maybe the same in your family. Just think of that most special person to you, the most innocent that needs so much caring, and someone, don't even want to think about it. So that person, I'll kill him. I'll solve the problem. I will take care of that one. Are there any examples in the Bible against capital punishment? So he says here there's people that try and do this, but they tend to commit hermeneutical homicide. So thou shalt not kill. This has no application to judicial execution. He says murder, killing here murder is the taking of an innocent life. Because if you say kill, that just means ending the life of somebody. Well, it says thou shalt not do that. So no one should do that. Understand context and what it's really meaning. Thus, the death penalty is the taking of a non-innocent life. Also, if it says thou shalt not kill, there shouldn't have been any wars with Israel, because you're killing a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And you might even say some are maybe innocent, just some kids that are going to die. But maybe in God's view, they're not innocent, because they're part of that whole system. hard to say that. It is dealing solely on the individual, in the individual context. It is speaking of thou here, I wrote, thou, individually, you shall not kill. You singular, killing someone like your neighbor. It's not referring to the government, in my view. Anyone want to comment on that? And we'll move on otherwise on these points, because I've heard that before. Anti-death penalty people say, well, the Bible says thou shalt not kill. In John 8, and you can look that up if you want, about where the lady caught in the act of adultery. Okay, so Jesus, what did he do there? Was he for stoning her or against it?
Against.
He didn't, he was totally neutral, he didn't say
Okay.
for or against.
I think that's
No,
the case. So, anyways, it's a good point, but he says invalid in context. Because the Romans held the rule of life and death and the right to implement capital punishment, why did they bring this up to Jesus? It was to trick him. The challenge to Jesus to commit sedition. If he had said, yeah, go ahead, he would have been arrested by the Roman government. Who are you to do this, to say this? Jesus' reply indicates, if we are to enforce it this time, some of you are next. What did he say there? You who are without sin cast the first stone. That's what he said. Because I wrote, Jesus didn't nullify the Old Testament law against adultery. He didn't say that law doesn't apply anymore. He stated that those that were without sin could cast the first stone. Thus, in a way, promoting the law. But on an individual basis, no one was worthy to enforce it individually. Also, this might be in a religious, or we call it church, but back then it was coming out of the Old Testament law in Israel sense, not a civil governmental sense. But it's in a bigger sense than just an individual. So if you caught someone committing adultery and the law was capital punishment for him, it's not right for you to kill him. It would be right for who? The one that has the authority to do that, which would probably be the civil government. Back then it was it was Israel, the leaders of Israel. Any statements on that? That was a trickier one. You have to think about it and go, well, it wasn't really for it, it wasn't really against it. Jesus came to earth to save lives. And let's go. We'll make it. Someone read the verse.
Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also.
So what would you say on this one? Look up and turn the other cheek type. Look up. So what would you say on that? When someone tells you that, so what about that? What would you say?
Again, it's the individual.
Yeah.
It's the individual. It's on that level. We as Christians are supposed to be like that. But the government's supposed to be not. Because this thing is, turn the other cheek, government. What would our society be like?
Chaos.
So this is one of the several passages cited of a type which encouraged not resisting evil, not taking revenge, and so on. But they are all in the context of personal relationships and have nothing to do with the judicial functions of the state. Certainly, persons should forgive others who commit criminal acts against them, but this does not oblige the state to forgive. If it did, then we could not even imprison a person or so much as exact a fine for a parking ticket. We're supposed to forgive everybody. And just think how our society would be. Let's take a short break and warm up.